last night.
Yeah.
From Jordan, nice to see Haydad back just in time to talk about how Georgia's behind Ole Miss in the new college football playoff rankings.
As they should be. As they absolutely should be.
I do think some people misconstrued the point you were making.
They thought I was trying to, speak it into existence, I guess.
And you were halfway right. The AP did what you thought was going to happen. The playoff committee did not do that.
They were correct. Ole Miss should be ahead of Georgia. They not only beat them, they beat them convincingly. They beat them easily. They should be ahead of them. So I think right now for Ole Miss, I think they're safely in, but that's this week. And I think if there's one thing we've learned through the first couple of these shows, is that this committee is flying totally by the seat of its pants. It is going to do what it wants to do, and its justification is going to be, I don't know, bro.
And you got some of that last night. So let's go through the poll, and we'll start with 25. Illinois, we'll go quickly. 24, UNLV. Missouri loses, and they don't move. They don't move a spot. They stay right there at 23.
Yeah.
They lucked their way into a home win over Oklahoma, and then lose their third game a week later, and they don't move at all. Missouri at 23, Iowa State 22, Arizona State 21. I think Arizona State's winning the Big 12. I think they are.
They may. They control their own destiny.
They certainly do.
I told y'all back in September when they beat Mississippi State, it's one of the best teams in college football.
Playoff team for sure.
Easily.
Tulane at 20, Army at 19, South Carolina at 18, Clemson at 17, Colorado at 16. The committee really does not like Texas A&M. They stay at 15 despite their 8-2 record. BYU at 14, SMU at 13. Let's stop right there for a second. Here's where this thing gets goofy. And Greg McElroy about pulled his hair, whatever he's got left, out of his head last night when that got revealed because their records are identical. Their resumes are identical, basically. And BYU beat SMU.
Yeah, that's
the
issue.
And they're behind them.
So,
why?
BYU, SMU got the Georgia Ole Miss treatment, basically.
Pretty much.
That is what I'm seeing here.
But
that is what I'm talking about, Ole Miss fans, right there. They're doing this however they want to do it. That's why I told you guys I wasn't going to be surprised.
Right. Boise State at 12. Tennessee 11. Tennessee fans are fighting mad. They need to not be. It is, just if you compare the resumes between Tennessee, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Alabama, theirs is fourth. I don't understand what they're angry about. Theirs is fourth. It just is. I don't get it. Theirs is fourth when you look at every data point that they look at. Strength of schedule, ranked wins, game control, all that stuff. Theirs is the worst of those four, objectively.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue too much.
Georgia 10, Ole Miss 9, Miami 8. They get jumped by Alabama at 7. Notre Dame 6, Indiana 5, Penn State 4, Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon rounds out your poll. So where do you want to start here? I mean, we probably should start local, but just first thought when you saw this.
I'm mostly okay with it. I love seeing Boise in that 4 spot. It just makes me happy for some reason. The thought of Boise getting a bye makes me happy. While Ohio State and Alabama have to fight their way into the semis.
Yeah.
I like that. To me, there's two big things that are glaring to me. One is Indiana. I firmly believe Indiana should be in, even if they lose to it. Now, if they get massacred, maybe not. But if they lose a tight game to Ohio State and go 11-1, they should be in. They should. They just should. All right, because it's the same thing we said with Michigan a year ago. At Michigan, 9 games into the season had beaten absolutely nobody. They won the games that mattered, and they got in. If Indiana loses 1 game, they should not. They should still be in. I really, really believe that. And I'm not saying that because it might be at the expense of Ole Miss. They should be in there if it's the expense of Tennessee or whoever. The other glaring thing to me is this right now, and I think this is the case. Texas has got to win. Has got to get to the SEC championship game. I think if you get to the SEC championship game, you're in. I don't think they're gonna penalize teams for that. I know we're gonna talk about Kiffin's comments later in the show. if A&M loses to, or if Texas loses to A&M and they're 10-2,
See ya.
I think they're out. I think
See
they're
ya.
all the way out. They have if they get in the pile with the 2 lost teams, they have the worst resume
Completely
by far.
agree. 100%.
There's no way around that. And right now, I mean, I don't know if they've done it, but Alabama would be favored over Texas on a neutral field, I think.
I
the way
agree.
they're playing right now. I think if Texas gets to Atlanta, they're going to be okay. I think at that point, you have to get them in. But if they lose to A&M, they are out. And I don't know that's enough to get A&M in. But I guess A&M at that point would go to the championship game, and maybe they would be in. So Texas is hanging on by dear life, in my opinion. They cannot afford losses.
I completely agree. Their resume is the worst if they get that second loss. So Ole Miss ahead of Georgia, not terribly surprising. We got the question on the text line. It's a good question. If you flipped the dates, not the results, but the dates of the Kentucky loss and Georgia win for Ole Miss, what's their ranking? And it's probably different now. That is a very interesting question. I think what won out in this is, even though it's not supposed to be this way, they're humans. And I think what do you look like right now is a factor. If Alabama lined up across from Vanderbilt again, the game happened and they lost, but what do you think would happen?
That game is screwing everything up, by the way.
It really is.
If Alabama only had one loss, we would not be having any of these discussions right now.
But I think a similar phenomenon is happening with Ole Miss and Georgia. The committees, that game just happened, and Ole Miss dominated Georgia. 59 rushing yards for Georgia. Right? They dominated them.
What's funny about college football is this, and this is true. If in week 4, when Ole Miss, week 5, when they lost to Kentucky, right? If that's where they played Georgia and they beat them, they're number 1 in the nation. They jumped to number 1, in my opinion, right? But then, so they're number 1. Then they lose to LSU, right? So they drop down to like 5th, 4th, maybe, right? If they lose to Kentucky when they beat Georgia,
see ya.
They're like 17th. They're out. So there is a ton of recency bias in everything happening with this thing right now.
And I'm okay with it because you're ranking the teams for the playoff that happens at the end of the season. So I don't hate the timing of things because teams do get better or worse or stay the same as seasons go on. So I don't hate it. But the committee put Ole Miss in front of Georgia. There are both the two sides to the argument are Georgia's resume, despite the head-to-head, is better. And I think that's an objective fact. Georgia's resume, if you remove head-to-head, is better than that of Ole Miss's. But in the committee's eye, they decided that the result of that game was too significant to ignore, and especially with how recently it happened. I think part of the BYU-SMU thing is because that game happened a while ago.
Like week 1 or week 2.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong.
Clearly, what have you done for me lately is a factor, and maybe it shouldn't be. You can argue that it should or shouldn't. That's certainly part of it. We'll continue on.
Your least favorite things about college football? This playoff thing is going to change it, I think. Don't you think if Tennessee could have already played UTEP and was going to play a game this week that mattered, they would do that?
Absolutely, yes.
This week is not as bad as it's been in years past, right? You've had some weeks where, like, literally everybody was playing FCS teams before the rivalry games.
Yep.
This year you have some real games. But Tennessee is playing UTEP. Like, how much better would it be for them to already have that win in the books back in week 4 or 5, and this week you're playing Kentucky or Vanderbilt or literally anybody in the conference?
Anybody in the conference.
That if you could beat them convincingly, it would be a big boost to you. That's huge. Georgia playing UMass this week. I mean, let's just they'll win, but let's just say they look sloppy. They win like 38 to 13 or something. It's just not a convincing performance. Not good, right? When you already have that thing in the bag, and you're playing, literally anyone from the SEC. You could be playing Mississippi State this weekend. If you beat them convincingly, it holds more weight than beating up on UMass.
Completely agree. And because, so we got this message, I'll read this and then get right back to that because that's a great point. He said, concerning the time that these losses or wins taken place, I think y'all are dead on. Go back to last year, and that's why Florida State did not make it because of their situation at the time with Travis. Absolutely. It was, what is Florida State right now? Florida State was not one of the best 4 teams without their quarterback right now, and that was the difference. And I mean, I agree with you, and that's especially problematic for Georgia, although, I mean, Georgia's in, right? Tennessee is the last team out. So Georgia, barring chaos, is likely making it because college football takes care of itself and teams lose in front of you. If Georgia wins their next 2 games, they're in. Yeah. They're going to make it. But for Georgia and for Tennessee, when it comes to the possibility of jumping Ole Miss and Alabama, what you said is dead on. Because Tennessee and Georgia can't really impress compared to what Alabama and Ole Miss can do. Georgia's playing UMass this weekend. Tennessee's playing UTEP. Ole Miss is in the swamp. And then even though Mississippi State is struggling, it's still a conference game. Georgia's playing Georgia Tech, and Tennessee's got Vanderbilt, who's better, but still. Mm-hmm. Ole Miss's wins, if they are able to get their next 2 wins, will be better regardless than Tennessee's and Georgia's. There's really not much Tennessee and Georgia can do to impress more with who they're forced to play because of bad scheduling than Ole Miss or Alabama, who's in Norman this weekend and playing Auburn.
You need, if you're looking at it like that way, for Tennessee, like I said, Georgia's in.
Georgia's going to make it if they win their next 2 games.
For Tennessee needs Ole Miss to struggle against Florida and Mississippi State, and they to win convincingly over UTEP and Vanderbilt. That might provide a little bit of leverage. A little bit, though. It wouldn't be much.
Yeah, and even still, I mean, that's a really good thing for Ole Miss's remaining schedule. The teams behind them can't really jump them because of your point. These bad conference games, non-conference games late in the year are going to bite them a little bit. And we get this question. This is one big qualm I have. Alabama jumped Miami after playing Mercer last week. Miami did not play. Their last time out, they lost to Georgia Tech. I have been unimpressed with Miami for 6 weeks now.
Yeah.
But why is it that Alabama jumps Miami, but not Ole Miss or Georgia? And here's why I bring Ole Miss and Georgia into it. Georgia's resume is better than Alabama's. It's better than Alabama's. Even though Alabama beat Georgia, Georgia's resume is better than Alabama's. And when you're comparing them to Miami, because Miami didn't play either one, right? So you're comparing Alabama and Georgia to Miami. Alabama and Georgia have the same record. Georgia's resume is better, and obviously they're behind Ole Miss, so you have to loop them into this as well.
Right.
Why does Alabama jump Miami, but not Georgia with the better resume, or Ole Miss, who you ranked in front of Georgia?
Right.
That one, I would love to know more why Alabama gets that benefit, but the other two don't.
Does Georgia have a better resume than Ole Miss?
Yes, they do. Georgia has a better resume than Ole Miss.
I want to hear you say it.
Yes, they do.
You were including it in, yeah. Right.
Objectively, they have a better resume than Ole Miss. They just, the head-to-head is the difference.
Look, we always knew that somebody was going to be mad at the end of this, right? Whoever we talked about it as like, oh, whoever's 13th, they're going to be upset. But this year, the way this season has played out, the parity that we've had in the SEC that we've never had before, Indiana coming out of nowhere. And I do find it funny that Indiana has been made like this target of why the playoff isn't. Like, this is why we wanted the playoff, for somebody like Indiana to get in and have a shot. That's what's right about college football. If they get left out, it's going to be like, why did we even do this? We could have just kept it at 2 and gotten, Oregon versus Texas. But I worry that, we have so many teams that when we get to the final day, I feel like 3 or 4 teams are going to be sitting there going like, we got screwed.
Mm-hmm.
That'll lead to 16, but we could have already bid on 16 for next year if the ACC and the Big 12 hadn't screwed us a couple of years ago from getting 12 early. If we'd had a couple of years worth of 12, it'd been like, this isn't really working. We need to go to 16.
Another message also opens the door for teams to schedule 4 actual cupcake games each season. Why play Michigan when you can play Morehead State? Another
that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is like, if we're going to really look at resumes, don't you just, instead of getting an FCS team, you just go get an FBS team that you can beat.
Mm-hmm.
So I worry about FCS teams in that. But because say what you want about, there may not be a huge difference between, we'll use UTEP again, UTEP and Murray State, right? But the committee's going to say, well, one's an FBS team and one's an FCS team. So, maybe you just go get 4 FBS teams. You just get ones you know that you can beat. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Notre Dame sitting at 6 with a loss to Northern Illinois, who lost again last night, by the way.
Oh. I saw that my guy Joe Moorhead won the wagon wheel again.
Did he? He won?
Yeah.
Nice.
Joe Moorhead in rivalry trophy games, almost impossible to beat. He's 4-1.
Look at him.
Yeah. Of course, he's only won 6 games in 3 years at Akron, but I'm just saying.
Ooh, that's
but
tough.
2 of them have been for trophies.
Somebody says just wait till next week when them MSU Bulldogs win. Here's the thing. There will be no playoff discussion if that happens. I mean, it's over. I mean,
then we can just move on with our lives at that point.
Well, we can talk about the other teams in the playoff and scenarios for everybody else.
Citrus Bowl when that happens, but that's not going to happen, so I'm not terribly worried about it.
If Ole Miss loses to Mississippi State and plays in the Citrus Bowl, I am not totally sure they'd be able to field a roster.
Here's what's going to happen: if Ole Miss if Mississippi State beats Ole Miss, I'll go and spoil everything here. I'm gonna have somebody come in and turn on my camera, but I won't be here. And then you're going to start the show, and Richard's going to be like, where is he? What's going on? I don't understand what's happening. I'm going to kick the door in at the Oxford studio, and I'm going to do the show live from there with the Egg Bowl trophy. I'm bringing it with me.
They'd let you have it.
Oh, if I told them I was going to do that?
They'd let you have it.
I'd be like, I'm putting a headset on that thing. It's going to sit there with me the whole time. So we'll see if I get to do it or not.
Yeah.
Don't forget, by the way, on the Egg Bowl, the 2 of us, special Sports Talk Mississippi.
Let's go.
9 a.m. to 12:30. We'll take you all the way into the pregame shows. Michael Borky, Brian Haydad on Black Friday. Special Sports Talk Mississippi. So if you're a big fan of Middays with Gerard, and hey, I love Gerard, my favorite Rebel, but it's going to be us. It's going to be us.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, that's going to be a really good time.
Should be fun.
So, yeah, mark your calendars. If you're driving up, doing whatever on Black Friday, doing some shopping, you can hear us talk about the Egg Bowl. So
yeah, the wife's in Target. You're just sit out in the car, me and Borky, talking Egg Bowl.
So, Indiana ranked 5th. And, I'm specifically talking about one person, I suppose. But there's been a lot of reaction like this. This is part of a column written by Nicole Auerbach. She is now at NBC and NBC's partner with the Big Ten, so keep that in mind. But It's not just her. Here's an excerpt from her column. What teams have done on the field should matter. I'm sick and tired of the idea that Indiana would be near the bottom of the SEC standings if it played in that conference. Hey, Nicole, that's what it would be. But anyway. I'm sick and tired of the idea that the SEC's 2-loss merry-go-round of teams are inherently better than the Hoosiers. They are, but anyway. Or Penn State or Miami or anyone else for that matter, simply because they'd be favored against them in a hypothetical matchup. If we went by Vegas odds, there'd never be any need to actually play any games. Alabama was favored over Vanderbilt by 22.5 points, so that's all we need to know, right? They're ranked 5th. What am I missing with the crying about Indiana? They are ranked 5th. They're ranked ahead of
preparing for this weekend.
It's preemptive crying in preparation for Indiana falling behind with their 109th ranked schedule in college football behind 2-loss SEC teams. But what are you talking about? They're ranked 5th.
Yeah.
They're ranked ahead of
their ranking today is fine.
But bringing up the 2-loss SEC teams, they're ranked ahead of them. Yeah. They're ranked ahead of Notre Dame.
She's just getting ahead of the arguments for the weekend.
It's ridiculous, though. They're not getting screwed by the committee.
I'll say it again. Need to cheer for Ohio State, Rebel fans. You don't want Ohio State with 2 losses in the pile with you. You don't want that.
But they're already ahead of them. So, I mean, still
they are,
safely.
But that drops everybody down a little bit. You don't want it. I think so. Just you don't want it.
But they're both already ahead of them.
You don't want it. Trust your friend Haydad.
Crying about Indiana. Well, I trusted you about the ranking thing. I'm kidding. Said even clearer now, if Army and Boise both win out and BYU, Colorado, and Arizona State all suffer another loss prior to the Big 12 championship, the Big 12 is going to get left out completely. And here's why he says that. Because it's not...
Yeah, I was mistaken when I was talking to somebody earlier on the text line about this.
Yeah, it is not like... every Power 5 conference is not guaranteed a spot.
Yeah.
It's the 5 highest-ranked conference champions.
So, yeah. Could be the Sun Belt. Could be the MAC. Could be anybody.
Could be anybody. An Army, in this scenario, would be an undefeated AAC champion with a win over Notre Dame in a neutral site.
Go a step further. Not only does that knock out the Big 12, it knocks out Notre Dame.
Knocks out Notre Dame. But just replaces them with whoever. Right? It would replace them with Army. So Notre Dame would fall out, but nobody else would move up because...
Yeah, because Army gets in. Yeah, I guess you're right, yeah.
Because Army gets
but still,
in. But
it's still Notre Dame out, though.
There is entirely a scenario in which that does happen. I mean, if Arizona State wins the Big 12 with 2 losses, are you totally sure that they would have a resume that should put them ahead of Army with a neutral site win over Notre Dame?
No, but yeah, we'll see.
Somebody says the SEC needs to schedule an SEC versus Big Ten Challenge weekend. I've got news for you, my friend. They're working on one.
They're working on that.
They are working on that right now. Speaking of working on things, here's the bracket at the moment. And so that's
Speaking of working on things, not Richard Cross.
Not Richard Cross, but is he ever? The bracket as it currently sits. So I think what we learned last night about Ole Miss is win the next 2 and you're in. I mean, there's very little that can happen behind you that would jump you multiple spots to knock you out. If you win the next 2 games, you're in. But can you host? Here's what the bracket would be today. Ole Miss would be at Indiana in the 10-7 matchup. Mm-hmm. Georgia would be at Penn State.
Okay.
Ohio State would be BYU would be at Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And Alabama would be at Notre Dame. First of all, heck yeah. I mean, come on.
These are all quality matchups. We're not getting any SEC overlap. We're getting SEC on the road in cold weather, which is exciting.
Yes, it is.
In my opinion.
Some snow games, buddy.
If you're an Ole Miss fan, you licking your chops.
You want Indiana.
Because not only are you getting Indiana, you're getting a Texas team I think you can beat too.
The winner of Ole Miss Indiana paired with Texas, Georgia Penn State paired with Miami, Ohio State BYU paired with Boise State, and Alabama Notre Dame paired with Oregon.
Never cheer harder for BYU in my life than the thought of getting a Boise BYU quarterfinal matchup. I would be losing it.
So if Ole Miss were to host a playoff game, what needs to happen?
So obviously the easy choice here is Indiana loses, right? I feel like even if Indiana stays in at that point, there's no chance for them to host.
Indiana losing.
So that would be it. And then
because you need to move up 2 spots.
Okay.
But the problem is Boise State behind you, if they went out, are getting a bye. So they're in front of you even though they're behind you, but you need to move up 2 spots.
I think the other thing you need to have happen is what we discussed earlier. Alabama wins the SEC. I'm sorry. You need A&M. Okay, I'm trying to figure out the logic here.
So Texas, I think Texas
you want
winning
Texas
the SEC,
out.
but in order to host, don't you want the team that's in front of you already to keep winning? To keep winning so they continue to get the bye. If Texas wins out, or if Alabama wins the SEC, they're already in front of you, and they would get said bye.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you want somebody behind you jumping you.
So then
it would be, I think the simplest path is Indiana and Notre Dame losing.
Yeah. Yeah, but Notre Dame losing to Army. Army would be the 12. There's almost no scenario Army's above 12.
Ohio State, I don't think even with – if they lose to Indiana, maybe a different story. If they lose to Oregon, I don't think you're jumping them in the host conversation.
You're not. Ohio State is almost locked in at 5. The only way they would not be of the 5 I don't know.
Yeah, because the four buys have to go to conference champions. So even like Miami losing doesn't really help you because SMU, who's behind you, would get the bye instead.
If Ohio State, I don't know. I don't see it. I feel like I need to. It's like I think Ole Miss can host, but I'm not. I have trouble seeing the path, like other than what you just said. But I think Notre Dame is going to beat Army, and
then they have Southern Cal at the end.
They'll beat them, and then they're kind of locked in. Indiana losing, maybe it just creates enough movement to get Ole Miss up a spot.
And then you need one more, right? You need Penn State. I don't think they're going to lose this game, but Penn State's at Minnesota this weekend.
The question becomes like if A&M beats Texas, I think Texas might be in real trouble. But then A&M goes to the SEC championship game,
exactly,
and so they're going to get in at that point. And so, but they would be behind Ole Miss. I think
they would.
But would they?
Or
they went to the SEC championship game? Wouldn't they have to? Don't they need to be ahead?
I think Texas A&M would get in, and Texas, as long as they don't let brand power take over, which they could, but Texas's resume at that point would be
awful.
Out.
Yeah, they should be out. Yeah. So A&M comes in as maybe like the 9. Maybe that's the
Texas
game. That might be the game. That might be Ole Miss hosting Texas A&M. Might be the game that you get, which would be good game, but like it's kind of though, right? I mean, look, I think it's kind of one of those things where like if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're super excited. You're like, we are hosting a college football playoff game. This is the best thing ever. I just wish it was a team we didn't always see.
Right?
How many times have I seen Texas A&M?
Yeah.
So.
Somebody asked, can Tulane make the 12-team playoff? John Summerall, their head coach, will be an SEC head coach within the next 3 years. I would take the under on 3 years. Yes, they can, but they need losses in front of them. I mean, they've lost to Oklahoma and Kansas State. Now, they should have beaten Kansas State. Should have, could have, would have. They didn't. So they need Army to lose, and they need Boise State to lose. That's the only way, really, they're getting there. I think, frankly, that they're the best of those 3 teams. But because they played 2 Power 5 games, they're getting punished for that. Go figure. Mike says they have really good pork tenderloin sandwiches in Indiana.
Yeah, they're massive. They're bigger than the bun.
It's crazy,
it's just a massive piece of pork.
Would getting dominated in a championship game drop Ohio State or a team ranked higher for Ole Miss hosting purposes? It could. We just don't know yet. There's no precedent. We have not seen it yet. We don't know.
Think that because I think the conferences are going to get to the committee basically like if you screw over our conference championship game attendees, we are not going to be happy with that.
And we can change this.
And we'll change it tomorrow if it has to be. You can't let Ohio State go to the Big Ten championship game and lose by like 21, and all of a sudden they're on the road after they were the 5 seed at work. You can't have that.
Yeah. Somebody says if Ohio State beats Oregon in the Big Ten championship, they will get the bye. And yes, they will essentially switch places.
But Oregon would just switch places. They'd be the 5. Yeah.
If Ole Miss goes
Oregon is not going to be any lower than the 5. There's no chance of that at all.
Unless they lose. Who do they play this?
Washington. They still have Washington at the end. They play. It's a Big Ten game. I should know it. Who does Oregon play?
Big Ten helmet schedule. Forgot that Oregon was in the Big Ten for a second. What a world that we live in. Oregon is off this weekend.
Oh, they're off.
Interesting.
So they have one more game against Washington left. So if they were to lose to Washington, but no.
They're still in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, the Big Ten has already sorted through all of its tiebreakers, and they have not found one that keeps Oregon out. So Oregon can lose to Washington. Oregon is playing that game completely free. Imagine playing that rivalry game completely free of anything other than just wanting to win it.
Yeah.
That almost happened in the Egg Bowl a few years ago when State was number 1. If they had beaten Alabama, they would have clinched the West. And so they could have I was looking forward to that. I was going to be like, we don't really care about this Egg Bowl thing. It's not a big deal. We're going to rest our guys, get ready for the SEC championship. But yeah, that would be the scenario there for Oregon.
Yeah. Somebody says Texas and Ohio State winning could have you jumping Alabama and Indiana. I don't think Alabama will fall behind Ole Miss with a loss in the SEC championship. Ohio State beating Indiana this weekend, I think you can guarantee Indiana will still be in, but they will fall behind the trio of Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. Mm-hmm. And so then you would need one more. But the finding the one more is improbable. It's Alabama losing to Auburn. It's Penn State losing to Minnesota. It's Notre Dame losing to Army or Southern Cal, who's bad this year. Yeah. That's where it gets hard for Ole Miss. One half of moving up 2 spots to host is very simple. It's Indiana losing as 2 touchdown underdogs this weekend.
Yeah. I'm going to make a prediction. Tennessee's going to get in.
College football does its thing a lot, doesn't it?
They're going to get in. They deserve to be in. I think they're a good enough team. Both of their losses are on the road. One's to Georgia. They have the win over Alabama. They deserve to be in. I think they're going to get in.